Welcome everyone to our Introduction to Data Analysis for Snowmobile Racing webinar. Tonight, we're going to talk about that very topic, and with kind of a start to data analysis, right? Where we give you kind of brief, but it's going to give you just some basic things of how data analysis works in motorsports, but with a focus on snowmobile racing. So as we go through the first part of this, some of this is a little bit basic. I know from a couple of notes that I got from some of you that's you're happy for that. And then what we're going to do is about 20 minutes in, 30 minutes in, we're going to actually start looking at some snowmobile racing data with some screen captures. And Jesse and I will talk about it a little bit, take some of your questions as we go. And then with some time we have left for questions, or probably even more likely, we will open up some live data, the same data we're going to look at the screen captures on, and use it for some demonstration and just talk about some different things that we'll see. So that's kind of where it's going. I put into the chat box a link to the presentation materials here. If you're watching this later on YouTube, any links that we may add or talk about will also then be taken and put right directly into the description box in YouTube. So if you're watching this in YouTube, just go down, hit the little show more button, and all of the links and some information will be down there as well. Okay, appreciate it. Let's Jesse, give us a little bit before we just jump right in. We've been friends for quite some time in the off-road world, and been chatting with you quite a bit about the snowmobile stuff. And give us just a little bit of a background on what you're hearing and the reason why we're doing this, and maybe even a little bit about yourself if some of these folks don't know you that well.
Yeah, Roger, I think we met probably 10, 12 years ago,
Yeah.
racing against each other. I think, well, we were racing against your son in the Torque series. Yep. But that's really how I got to know you you worked for AIM at the time, and I was just getting involved with the AIM stuff on the trucks. Then I worked my way into Snowcross through the trucks and Carlson Motorsports when I worked there with Derek, who I think's on here right now. But then, it seemed like not a lot of people understood them. And through the background in truck racing, I just kind of, learned from you and Robbie, Mike, the guys at AIM, just kind of tried to bring the knowledge over to the snowcross world on how to use the systems. A lot of people had them. A lot of people had them on their snowmobiles, but didn't really know how to dissect the data.
Perfect. And what the advantages are, which is the reason why sometimes we do these introductions, and it's introduction to data acquisition, right? But you were mentioning that there were any number of people that already had them on their snowmobiles, but maybe weren't taking it to that level where you really get the power of this stuff, which is the analysis itself. So that's where we're going to focus a little bit today. Thanks for that. Yeah, the old off-road days, I was back there, and it would just be me for many, for 3 or 4 years, and then AIM started to come in and send even a few more folks to help out. It grew pretty quickly, and my guess is snowmobile racing is the data side is growing very quickly, and we'll probably make even a bigger focus on it here in the near future. So.
And it wasn't until last year that I actually got Mike and Robbie from AIM to come to a race and realize, 80% of the snowmobiles out there have an AIM system on them. So that was an eye opener for them. And I think that's why they're open to helping a lot more. They really didn't know how much of their product was actually out there.
Yeah, it's amazing as I travel around, and I take support calls mainly in email and these kind of webinars and such, and make the training videos. And I'm always amazed when I get a note from somebody and say what they're using our products in. It's all the way from certainly the sports cars and the motorcycles and the snowmobiles, but drag cars and lawnmower racing and downhill. Those scooters that run down the hill with no power, right? And sailboats and the stuff is everywhere. It's just amazing to me. So before we actually get into it, let's take a look real quick at today's agenda, just real quickly. I know I like when I'm going to sit down and watch something like this, that I have an understanding of kind of where we're heading. It always helps me. We've done the introduction bit a little bit. I'm gonna give you a single slide on a little bit about AIM Sports. This is 100% no sales kind of a thing, but I want you to be able to have an idea of who we are, and then we're going to talk about the basics. What is data acquisition, why use it, and then how to use it. And we're going to spend most of our time in the how, because that's the data analysis part. But I do want to kind of go over a few of these basic things, just to give you an understanding of maybe some good ways to think about this if you're not somebody that's used this quite a bit. So, that's kind of where we're going to go. And at the end, we're going to, as I mentioned, take a look at some actual data analysis examples from snowmobile racing. So the event we're going to look at, Jesse, was it just last weekend, or is it a couple weekends ago, something like that?
Yep, it was Friday of last weekend.
Perfect. So a lot of you, I think, were probably at that event or know of it. So we'll talk about that in some more depth when we get there. Okay, so let me see if I get that to work. There we go. A little bit about AIM. AIM has been around this business for quite some time, a little more than 25 years now in the data acquisition business, and we opened up in 1996 in Lake Elsinore, California. So those guys coming to a snowmobile race, Jesse, is obviously a bit of a weather check, weather shock at least, right? So, but started off in '96 in Lake Elsinore, and then we really kind of wanted to get a second office, somewhere on the East Coast, somewhere over there. So opened up another office in Roanoke, Virginia. It's the same company, but and if you call that 800 number that is there right below the image of the United States, that number will ring to the closest of that office to you. And if you're on the to the right or to the east of that in the red part, and you try to call maybe a little bit later in the day, and Roanoke is closed, the phone will just ring directly to the California offices. So we've got a pretty good wide window of tech support help for you. So keep that in mind. If you need anything, make sure you give us a call, support wise, and get you taken care of. So we've been around quite a while, and that 800 number is something you probably want to keep handy when the time is, if you have any questions or anything. What is data acquisition? Let's talk about it a little bit on, more of a broad sense. I think of data acquisition in with many different methods, and there's a couple bulleted items there. But seat of the pants is one that that is in effect a different method of data acquisition, right? You're going to ask the writer, a little bit, and they can give you some feedback, certainly. Now that's a picture of me when I was just got started right there, back in the old days. A stopwatch, we're going to talk about it in a minute, but lap times are a critical part of what we do, obviously, and that stopwatch is a very early form of data acquisition. What was my lap time? Was I faster or slower? The video can be a help. And we have a video solution. Video alone is a great tool. You can see the lines and see some different things. And then we have what we call a Smarty Cam, which takes video to another level in the motorsports world, where we actually start to put the graphical elements in real time of the RPM and the speed and the whatever it is that you want on right onto your video. And when you get done, you just pull the card out and watch the video, and you've got speed and a track map with the dot going around it. And it's video can be a help, especially for some folks that like to learn visually. It sometimes is a great way to get into it. And of course, the data acquisition systems, and where we're going to focus all of our time here today. I look at data as just another tool in the toolbox, right? You've got these snowmobiles, and you're working on them, and you're tweaking and tuning, and the vehicle and the driver, right? You're doing different things, and these little black boxes, these data loggers, are just like an engine or a shock dyno. They're just recording and measuring things, and when they're measuring things, they're not just measuring the vehicle performance or the rider performance, but the overall performance at the time, right? That black box is not very smart, a heck of a memory, but not super smart at that point, right? And then we bring it into the software, this analysis piece, and that's where we start to be able to pick out, okay, you gained a half a second on this lap. Why did that happen? Was it because of something that you did different as a rider with a different line choice, or did you get on the throttle earlier, or did the track change, or did we can pinpoint why the why, And so we're going to talk a lot about that as we get into this for the next hour. You'll continue on with the theme of what is data acquisition. The software, you think of it as two different things, and we want to make sure we kind of keep them straight. But there's a configuration side that you do pre-session, and I tend to do this, when I'm still at the race shop, right? Working on stuff, get in there, set it all up, tell it what sensors are plugged into if you need it, what all the different things you might want. You kind of do that ahead of time. And we have a part of the software packages that do that. And in all of our current pieces of hardware, anything you can get now, we use Race Studio 3. And Race Studio 3 is it's kind of shown by this upper picture here. And that's where you'll do not only your configuration for your current generation of loggers, but it's also where you do your downloads. And when you get the data off of the logger, we start the analysis process. And that is it with a program that looks like the bottom half, which is Race Studio 2 analysis. We've got a Race Studio 3 that we're in beta and getting it to where there'll be just another button up here, which will be an analysis button in Race Studio 3. Right now, there's just a big 2 there. It takes you to this older piece of analysis software that we're going to use today because it's still production. And in there, post session, that's where you do all of the functions that you need in order to understand, what happened, where it happened, and why did it happen, which we'll talk about in some depth.
And the Race Studio program is also where you do your track mapping.
Mm-hmm. Yep, virtually everything that, and some of that gets remembered from one session to another, obviously. But when you're first there, some of your tracks are temporary in nature, and so the very first time you go out on the track, we have to build. We have to figure out the start-finish line, make sure that's done there. We can do it ahead of time a little bit, but a lot of those things we do, and then the rest of the weekend, everything's pretty smooth. So, to continue on with that, what is it? But I look at it as data is just knowledge. It's just information. And sometimes you need to know where you're faster, where you're slower. Some of the vehicle health things you need to understand, because knowledge equals speed. And once you need to understand what you're doing, and understand where to make the changes, and that's where data is such a big help. It cuts down that experience curve. That if you've been doing this for 5 or 6 years, you go ride the snowmobile, you come back in, you have a pretty good idea. But data can help those people as well. But boy, it really takes that person that is just brand new at this and be able to look at it and say, what was my RPM? What is my, my track speed, my GPS speed, whatever it happens to be. So we'll talk about some of that in depth as well. Why use it? Well, I always look at it as really, we can dig into the deeper whys, but really it's all about constant improvement. If you're not getting faster, if you're just holding your own speed, everybody else is getting faster, you're really going backwards, right? You need to constantly improve in motorsports. And really, we're trying to improve 3 things. Everything you do in data with your analysis is really all about driver performance, rider performance, vehicle performance, make the snowmobile faster, and vehicle health. If you don't finish the race, it's worthless to be super fast, I suppose, right? So that vehicle health thing is another part of it that we don't talk a ton about today, but it's another big piece of the triangle. Because if you continually improve all 3 of those, your results are going to be will be improved, obviously. So a little line down at the bottom is a line we have in some of our data analysis documentation. One of them is, with the proper and consistent use of data, your race program will improve. And I think that's real important. And the secondary piece of that is, remember, we all start to really lean on our data heavily. It's just by nature. When we're looking for that additional half a second or 0.2 to catch the lead pack, and that's when you think you really need it. But it's just as important to download when you're doing well, and have good data than to look at and say, okay, this is what good data looks like as you're learning this process. So it's just as important to understand when things went right as when they went wrong. So don't put the data, don't put the computer away at the end of a weekend if you did really well in the final. Go ahead and grab that data as well, because that's going to be valuable data at some point. Keep that in mind. How do you use it? That's really what we're here for, right? Most of you signed up for. So there's just some best practices that I like to maybe talk about, again, to demystify this process and to get this down to where it's fairly easy to understand, because while it is complex, how you use it does not need to be so complex. So think about it in this way. There's a hardware side and a software side. I look at the hardware side as you need to design that first, and I'm not talking about the screens and the resistors and that kind of a thing, but design what you want on your snowmobile. What's important to you? What are you getting out of the ECU connection? And is there anything other data that you might want? And figure that out, and then talk to Jesse and understand what you're gonna how you're gonna get the right parts and the right cables and all that stuff. Install it, of course, configure it and calibrate it. That's all done, basically, certainly one time on the design and the install. Then maybe you tweak some configurations and calibrate it, in the shop before you head out there, and then that stuff's pretty much done. The rest of the weekend, you basically follow this little process. You go out on track, you use it, you download it, and then in the software, you open that file, you analyze it, and you really ask yourself 3 questions. What happened? I was faster, or I was slower, I was, my lap times are here, and then you see that you're maybe a little bit quicker and you're trying to figure out why. Well, where did it happen? We're going to give you some tips and some ideas on how to find out where on the track it happened, how much you gained or lost in different spots. That where did it happen? That's another a big third of what we're talking about here. And then the biggest one, why did it happen? What you're really going to do is what happened, where it happened, and then you got to figure out, okay, I see that I'm slower in turn 2, over the course of the run. You got to figure out why. Yeah, we can look at some G-forces vertically. Did the track go away? Did the engine lose power? Did all of these different things? You got to figure out why. And sometimes that why is a couple of questions deep. And then when you kind of get it figured out, you make 3 or 4 changes on the either to the rider or to the snowmobile, and boom, you repeat and go back up and you go use it again. And you follow those 3 or 4 steps to every time that you sometimes things probably happen fast. You don't have time to download every time maybe, but if you ever have time, when you do have time, obviously you want to download it and do this quick analysis. So that's just the basic understanding of maybe some best practices of data acquisition. So kind of wanted to talk about that a little bit and get that out there for you. To kind of sum all this up in one little screen here that I used to have this on 2 pages, right? And I've just continued to fine tune it down to this 1 page. And if when somebody talks to me about the concept of data analysis, these are the steps I basically try to make sure everybody understands. What I just talked about, what happened, and many stop there. We'll see it. You open up your data file, you say, okay, hey, yeah, I gained 3/10, and you're going, woohoo, perfect. We're in the right direction here. We made our changes right, and then they stop looking at the data. But really, you got to dig in a little bit more. Like I mentioned, where did it happen and why did it happen? And then there's one more piece of that here in the middle, which one additional question you might want to ask is it the vehicle or is it the driver? So sometimes you'll see that there's a loss of a couple of tenths in this corner, maybe a half a second. And you want to ask yourself that next question, which sometimes is hard, but is the driver reacting to the movement? In other words, the sled bogs or the whatever it happens to be, or did the driver create that problem? And so what you want to, it's a big part of the why, right? How do you adjust something if you don't understand exactly why it happened? So a critical component. Make sure you keep on thinking about, I see what happened, I see what's going on, but why did that happen? What a little bit deeper.
And of course, it's never the rider's fault.
Maybe that's why I added this into the equation here. This is my son right here that Jesse mentioned a minute ago. So I learned data from coming up with him as he was on his motorsports journey, and of course there was always the father-son dynamic of me looking at data, and it took it takes all writers some level of time to not look at this as a negative tool against them and trying to tattletale, but rather a tool that they can use to go, oh, I am doing that. Okay, well here, let's how do I in their own mind, right? How do I get past that and do that correctly? It can be such a benefit for drivers, even though there's sometimes a little bit of a pushback at first. I have something I call the money channels, real critical in data, lap times and speed. And I put them in that order on purpose. Lap times is the bottom line, right? There is the mile per hour you're on at this corner or on this straightaway is important, but that really is even building the lap time. So those two things to me are what I always focus on. And then there's a ton of other channels, depending on how many you've got in your ECU and maybe some sensors you've added, all these different things. All of those other channels are doing nothing but supporting the lap times and the speed, because that's the one that gets you positions and makes up lap time for qualifying and wins races, right? So all of those other channels are there, but they're really just supporting the money channels. That's another way of just thinking about this that makes it a little easier to understand. And then, and I talked about it a little bit earlier, but that data analysis triangle, everything you're going to look at in your data is based around one of these three. Some of them overlap, but you're either trying to improve the rider, you're trying to improve the vehicle, or you're trying to make it live longer, vehicle health. And so if you keep that in your mind, all these squiggly lines and all this overwhelming data becomes a little bit easier to digest. Okay. Let's look at it. I've got four examples here. We're about halfway through our webinar, our time frame. So we've got about 4 or 5 minutes. We'll look at each one of these, and then we will jump out of the presentation and we'll jump into the same data. So if you have any questions, as Jesse and I start to dissect them and give you some examples of ways that you might use this on a directly from a snowmobile and from a recent race here that we're looking at. Throw some questions in there if you have them, and then if it's something that we can't point out real easily on these slides, we will jump into the live data where we can move some stuff around. The first one, we have downloaded the data, we have opened it up, right, in Race Studio 2, our data analysis software. If you haven't played with it too much, let me take the 2 or 3 minutes to just give you an introduction to what we're looking at, and then we'll jump in and look at some data. This is the software itself. Over here on the left, we call this the measures and laps toolbar. When you open up this software, it's always going to open up with whatever you had opened when you closed it. If in this case, we've got some different channels open in some different positions. We'll get to that in a second. We also have all of the channels from your data logger, whatever happened to be in there. If you have just the solo 2 model, it might be the ECU channels and a few GPS based channels, but it might have a bunch like this one does. So whatever you have available to you will be showing over here. You'll notice that some of these are pushed down. You can see that they're depressed, where we take the mouse and literally just click right on that button. And when we click on that RPM button, it adds it over here into the main window. And then there's a cursor, and wherever I click on this screen, that cursor is placed there. And these are what we call channel tags. And for the active channels that we have turned on and are actually viewing in this main window, we call it a measures graph. I can see where I put this cursor, I can see what the RPM was right when, in that millisecond of time, what the engine RPM was. And in this case, we've got throttle position up here. It's at 67%. It's this blue line. All of these are changeable in color if we wanted to, but that's the blue line. You can see he's going from, this is a start of the race. And you can see that he's sitting here, the EGT is coming up as it's going up there. That's the blue one. And then release the throttle a little bit. RPM was starting to come up just a little bit. And then right here is where the rider went to full throttle. The RPM starts coming up. You can see the speed down here on the bottom side. This is track speed, and this is GPS or true vehicle speed. And then we've got track slip down here below, where this is just this one, this one minus this one, right? So we can actually look at this and see how much faster the track is going than the vehicle itself. So you slip, right? Track slip. And so that's how we kind of got this set up. And wherever I put the cursor, the sled is barely moving, right? And the everything is not quite rolling up. He's just throttled up, and that's how you look at this data. There's a lot of other detail here. We can look at it in time, time or distance. We can put track maps up. We can put the GPS map up. We'll look at some of those options here in just a moment. But that's the basic layout. And if I wanted to add another channel, if I wanted to come over here and add in the the temperature of the engine, we could just click on that and tell it which window we want it to sit in and look at the data, right? So
and this is data from a Polaris. The Skidoo and the Arctic Cat have the same channels. They might be called something different, but it's all the same.
Perfect. And what I wanted to do is give you these 4 slides in the presentation. So if you grab some data or you have your own data, you can kind of look at these back and say, well, yeah, Roger and Jesse were talking about this, and this is how they kind of had it set up. Maybe you have data and you just never taken it to this level. I'll talk about. I have these saved as what we call a user profile. And if your channel names are different, we'll have to work with you to get it to work exactly perfectly. But it'll start to set up your screens the way that I've set these up. And maybe it's a shortcut for you to get to where you can use the data a little bit quicker. So this is one of the views. And what I've done here and what I tried to do on all screen captures that I do like this, and it'll be the same way for the next 3 slides as well. What I've done is I've drawn a little box around the icon that opens up the measures graph. And then I've even drawn a little box around here. There's other things we can look at under here, but I've drawn a box around measures graph because that's what we call this. And how do you open that up if you want to recreate this with some of your own data? When you look at this, you'll be able to look at some of the different settings I have here and be able to recreate this yourself. Okay, so Jesse, what's the important part about what we're seeing here as far as the data beyond what I've kind of talked about a little bit?
I think the biggest thing that you'd want to look at on a start is the pipe temperature, the EGT temperature at the point of where he goes full throttle,
right
and
here.
then your RPM leading up to that, which would be your engagement. And then once he goes full throttle, your RPMs that go to the right there, how consistent they are, if they go uphill, downhill, and also your track speed versus GPS speed right below that. If that goes straight up and then over, you're spinning big time, where if you have a nice rounded curve like that, you can kind of see how it catches up to ground speed the farther you go down the hole shot.
Yeah, and then here's
of course the least amount of spin, the better it's going to be, but it's never going to be perfect on snow.
Yeah, you probably have to have some spin, or else it wouldn't be good either, right?
Right.
There's a percentage there that as you work with your data, maybe you probably find that. I'm no snowmobile guy, but I'm assuming it's like dirt at some level. Sometimes you want more spin, sometimes you want less spin, depending on the makeup of the grip of the snow, right? Probably wet snow or slick snow, whatever. So you'll pretty quickly learn maybe what this a good look of one of these is. The other thing that I do on all of these slides is I've put up here just a little bit of what we've just talked about. So if you only have the presentation materials later, you don't have access to to this video to watch back and get a little bit of it, we give you a little bit of background information on the slide as well. So, okay, anything else you'd like to add to that one before we move to the next one, Jesse, or any other questions from anybody? Make sure you throw them into the question and answer box. You good, Jesse?
Yep.
Okay, let's go to the next one. I just kind of picked 3 or 4 different ways of looking at data. The first one we did was just a start. Jesse tells me that the start is just such a critical part of these races. And so we wanted to make sure we showed that piece of looking at the data. The second one is the same basic software layout. This is a measures graph again, just like we had before. But I've added in this little icon here says GPS. And I've just added it in as a window alongside of it. And this is everywhere that these 2 laps, it's the same rider, same session. It's the first lap of the race and the last lap of the race. And we'll talk more about that here in just a second. But I've just thrown up a picture of the GPS overhead view, what we call the driven line map. And in this case, in the measures graph, we've just got some simple stuff. Just the GPS speed remember we talked about money channels, right? Lap times and speed. This is kind of the bottom line. And then I've just included RPM and throttle position. And when you open up 2 laps in our Race Studio analysis software, this little bar comes open at the bottom, which is probably the most powerful tool you will have, especially early on, but it's still the most powerful tool that I use when I'm doing data work. And it is showing the red line being the fastest of these 2 laps. And if you look over here, it's a 45.0 and a 46.6. So there's a 1.6 second difference. The red first lap being the fastest of the 2, and then the blue lap on the final lap. And you look at this, and if you're below, if the blue lap is below it, it was faster. If the blue line is above it, it's slower. Right where it crosses over, that's where, if you were ghosting, like you do with some of the video games, and you have 2 cars racing each other, if they're ghosting, that's when the 2 cars are at exactly the same spot at the same time, right? When these 2 lines are crossing. So if you look at this pretty closely, you can see that the blue lap here down through turn 1 and 2 was actually a little bit faster than the first lap. And then pretty even, running right about even. And then down the back straightaway, you can see the speed increasing, and that's right through here. We'll see this, you'll be able to see it a little easier in the live data, because I can put the cursor there and you can see where the cursor, the little X's go. But this is up the back straightaway, and you can see that the blue one is just losing time slowly down that run. It's slower in GPS speed, right? And and then down here at the end, this is the big tell, right? This should catch your eye. I drew a big red box around it, So yeah, that's pretty clear too. But you notice how the blue one was running pretty even with the red lap, and then that last 250, 300 feet, the driver lost right there. I'm only half of the loss, and it's already a second behind. So that right from there to there is about a second, and so it's about 1.6 or so by the end, right? Just like we talked about. And so this blue rider, same rider, later lap in the event, on this lap, the rider lost that 1.6 seconds. All happened in the last little bit of the track. So then you sit there and you go, okay, well, you're looking at your lap times real quickly, and you go, well, what happened there at the end? Was the snowmobile having a mechanical problem? Where did he lose that time? Was it over the entire track? Was it just under braking? Was it just the jumps? Where did it happen? It all happened right here, and I clicked the cursor there for this picture, and you can see these are dynamically linked together, right? So wherever I put this cursor, the cursor of the 2 laps shows up over here in the GPS map. This big red box will not be there when we look at the live data, but so right there, it's halfway through the loss, right? All of that blue lap being slower happened on this hairpin and taking that inside corner. Could not get back to the throttle as much and lost a bunch of time, all the way through this entire section. And all of that happened in this hairpin. And the biggest thing that stands out until we start digging in a little bit more is that there's a big line change between the red one and the blue one. Okay. That would be the first, that would be your 45 second to a 1 minute look at this and go, oh, I think I got an idea. What happened? Lost 1.6 seconds. Where did it happen? Oops, sorry about that. Where did it happen? It happened here in this last couple of 100 feet, maybe 300 feet. And it all happened in this last little piece. This is the start finish line right here. So this is that last little bit. Lost all the time there. And then the next question, of course, is why? And the first why, I would say, we'll dig into a little bit more in a second, but boy, there is a big difference in line change. I'm suspicious, right? So, and we would look on. Jesse, what do you see? What would you like to add to that a little bit before we go to the next slide?
I guess the only variable you have is if somebody was in front of you or there was a crash or something, you don't have that unless you had a Smarty Cam or something hooked up. But for the most part, line choice, especially that one right there, is huge. It's almost 0.8 seconds or something like that.
Yeah. Well, 1.6. Yeah, it's 0.1 right to there, right? So it's 1.6 overall loss of time. And again, you got to give some leeway to the rider. did that outside line just go? It was great for the first 2 or 3 laps, but then there developed a huge hole, or a broken down snowmobile out of that line. The Smarty Cam video or memory right when you got off of it, those kind of things are helpful, obviously, right? So, okay, what the main thing about looking at this one is understanding that we can add the GPS in for position on the track. You don't have to remember it by these squiggly lines and a little bit harder to understand where you are here, but we've got some mapping functions. And then the biggest thing I wanted to add into this one is this whole thing about comparing laps, either from a teammate or even you're against yourself. In this case, 2 of your own laps, and understanding where you were slower and how much slower based on the time compare bar. Very, very important piece.
And John had asked, how do you break it down into laps? If you don't have the track mapped out prior or after the first practice, it will always, if the track is mapped out, it'll always go to there since you're nearby it. But you could go to the lap manager tab and then insert the start finish line with your cursor. And we can show them that when we get into the live data.
Yeah, we'll show that to you real quickly. But typically what you're seeing, John, is something that happens in your first session before you've had a chance to put in the lap marker or the track map, load the track map into the data logger, so then the rest of the weekend you won't have that problem. And if it's a track that maybe you even have a chance before the race starts, go out to the start finish line with your phone. There's lots of GPS apps where you can get the latitude, longitude of the start finish line just by walking up to it and getting that, and then going in and making the track map ahead of time, the start finish line, and sending that into your data logger. One of those things that if you want, send me a note, send Jesse a note. I've got lots of some shorter videos and some longer ones that talk about track maps and how to build that little map thing. And then I've got some specifically about doing what we're going to talk about, that inserting a start finish line after the data was gathered. So you fix it on one end or the other, right? Either pre-session or after session. We've got options for both. So, okay, good question, John. The next one I want to talk about, again, just some different ways of looking at data. Everybody has a different way that they like to look at it. Some people are real number crunchers. Some people are visuals. The video works for some people. I wanted to show you a couple other ways. Here's the third one, histograms, pretty common in motorsports. One of the things that we might want to do, what's one good measure of if the snowmobile is working well and now the rider is doing with it, is how much time are they at different parts of their throttle position. The biggest one being how much time, how much percentage of the lap, we can do it either way. How much percentage of the lap are you at full throttle on these laps that are 1.6 seconds apart in lap time? And in this case, we have a function just for that. It's called a histogram button up here. I've circled it. Here's the tab when you open it. And you just turn on the throttle position and it automatically does the math for you. And it takes it, and these are in 10% buckets. So this top one here is 90% to 100%. We call them bins. And it's breaking this down and saying, you can see the red lap is showing but behind the blue one. So it's got the most percentage of a lap compared to the blue one. It's at 36% of the lap was at between 90 and 100% throttle for the red lap, the one that was slightly faster, 1.6 seconds faster. And the blue one was 24.9, 25%, right? So 11.1% more of the lap on this faster lap was the rider at between 90 and 100%. That is a great measure of how much the rider was confident and was able to pin this thing and get after it, right? The other one that's kind of interesting though is you can look at a couple of other ones here. The 80 to 90%. There it's the blue one. So it is at 21% and only 5% for the red one, the fastest lap. So what you're seeing here is, and even the 70 to 80 is more on the blue, the slower lap. The rider is at nearly full throttle, more on the slow lap, but not at open throttle, wide open throttle. Kind of an interesting thing. And then you get here in the middle where they're more or less the same within 2 or 3% across these other bins. And then the one at the bottom is always interesting to me too, is you've got that when everything is working right, you can either be on it or you can be off, right? And maneuvering, the snowmobile. The fastest lap is actually got 18, almost 19% at 0 to 10, where the other rider is at 15%. So there's that 3 or 4% there that it's kind of showing that the red faster lap was either wide open or off the throttle and maneuvering the sled to do what they want with it. What do you see there, Jesse? Anything else that you kind of look for occasionally? And I know you mentioned that this was something that you've started to use a little bit more often. What do you see?
Yeah, especially in comparing riders on the same track. On the same equipment, you can show if one's lap time is a couple seconds faster than the other. You can, overlay the laps in the GPS map, or you can look at it like this and just say, hey, 25% of the time he was 100% throttle and you were, less or more or whatever.
And if we back up one, that was a nice, that histogram is a nice way to break it up in and give you that full lap of a number you can kind of hang your hat on, right? Or if you come back here, here's your throttle position down here, and it's a bunch of squiggly lines moving all over the way that you guys run these things. But here's a perfect example of that. Here we are. I can't put the cursor there, but this is that back straightaway right here. And while the blue line was a little bit slower, also was not at full throttle all the way down the back straightaway. That you could pick it up here, or we could pick it up in the histogram. Just different ways of looking at kind of the same thing. Okay. And you can see other times here that the rider was at less percentage on the blue one than the red one. So just interesting little things that we can kind of pick up on. Okay, so that's the histogram function. We got one more I'd like to show you before we got about 15 minutes before we bail out and start looking at some live data and give Jesse an opportunity to help me click around a little bit in some real data, and then take any questions you might have. The last one I thought I would use, it's not used a ton in snowmobile racing yet, but I find there's value to it, and it all depends. Again, it's just different methods of looking at data. They're all valuable. It's which one you want to maybe works best for you and get you what you want. We call this a split report. This is the icon for it up here, and it's and here's the tab for it. And then I've got a track map that I've built. And there's some steps to this, and I've got some good videos on how exactly to do this, but we're not going to get into detail here tonight, but because this is just the introduction to it. But you've got this track map, and you can notice that here's the start finish line, and there's a green chunk right here, and then there's a blue chunk. Basically, the way that it works in the AIM software by default, you can change this if you wish, but left-hand greens are straightaways. They're acceleration pieces. It might be all series of whoops, but it's in a straight line, thinking laterally, lateral G's. Left-hand corners are blue and right-hand corners are red, and straightaways are green. Acceleration, even though that's in a corner, it was there more or less, there was for the most part it was an acceleration run. And so you've got these little chunks of this map that have been kind of split up, right? And then what we can do is go look at this little section right here, this green section, and that is this section of the track. And what it's done is it's taken every lap time that you did. In this case, there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 laps. I don't know if this is a practice or a race, but there are 6 laps here. And what it does is, because I told it I wanted to see these splits in this split report, it broke down how much time the rider was in that split every lap of this session. And then the fastest one is highlighted in blue. Kind of, is the track getting rougher? Was it getting smoother? Was that a whoop section? We can talk about it, but he was this particular rider 4.65 on the last lap, and on the best lap, it's highlighted by red. We'll talk about this in a second. Was 4.8, so it was 1500ths quicker on his last run, even though the lap was 1.6 seconds slower. So that area there certainly was not a problem on the last lap, right? We can go back here and we'll see where some of these slower pieces were based on where we know. What I really wanted to focus on was 3 things here, though, is now that we've got these segments built, number one is these are just your lap times. These were the lap times of this particular snowmobile from start finish line back to start finish line. Okay. And we give, it's highlighted in red right off the bat. It always highlights your best lap of the run. It's just automatic. The second thing we do, and if this is all automated, once you build this little track map, is we give you the best theoretical lap. Think about this, that this rider, these little blue segments are all over the place on different laps, right? And so in this particular little section, let's say this red section, the hairpin, the tight part of the hairpin, the right hairpin is right here. The best that rider did was a 3.6 compared to all these 3.7s, 3.6, 3.9, 4.3. And that 3.6 happened on lap 6, which AIM, the way we label them is the warm-up laps, and some of the other stuff is all in there. So this is really 1, 2, 3. That was the 4th lap of the event, right? Was the fastest that rider went through there with a 3.61. And that's a 10th faster than most of the stuff earlier, and then really slowed down there towards the end, right? The 0.3 drop, and then the big drop there that we kind of already looked at a little bit. Okay, we take all those blue ones, all those fastest segments, and we stitch them together for you. And if the rider were to go out there and do the best segments of this entire nice little map, the rider was theoretically capable of a 43.1. The best the driver did was a 45.0, right? So there's your target. And if you go faster and you start to get down, the segments will just be a little quicker, right? It's almost an unachievable goal. It's that carrot that just keeps that hanging out in front of you, but it's a great little tool that people like to look at. One of the things a lot of people do as you get used to doing these is they start to just compare that time, not in actual number, but the difference between the 45.0 to a 43.1. There's 2.9 seconds, right? And so you start to look at that, and the closer you get those together is the more consistent the rider is and the snowmobile may be. And then the third one, and the one I use a lot, and one of the reasons I like to show this is often you're racing, right? Or there's people in your way, the tracks are changing, all the different things are happening out there as a rider, and you don't always get your best lap from the start finish back to the start finish line. The rider may come in and say, boy, on that 4th lap I put these segments together, I think pretty well. I really got through there, and that was a pretty good lap. And they come back in and they John, with the 4th lap wasn't great, right? But what we do for you is we highlight this in yellow. You see this yellow highlighted area, and that is the rider's best lap, but not from start finish to start finish. So what we can do, and we call it the best rolling lap, is in this particular case, the beginning of this second green segment, right? There's a green, a blue, and then this second green segment. So green, blue. So right from where my cursor is, right here, around on the second lap, past the start finish line, back to here, that's what we've highlighted here. The rider actually turned from there to there a 44.88. Okay, even though from the start finish line and what the timesheets all say, the live timing on the apps all show a 45.0, but the rider actually was a couple of tenths quicker than that if you look at it from some spot else on the track. While almost useless sometimes, and maybe there's a little bit of brag going on there with the rider, right? I'm able to turn all that's fine, but what we like to see sometimes is what is the snowmobile and the rider actually capable of, and sometimes you get a really good lap in there, and you go, well, should I really go back and make a bunch of adjustments, or does the rider just need to get a little bit more consistent and actually maybe hit that from start finish line to start finish line? So I think the best rolling lap is a fantastic tool that I use all the time. So wanted to kind of show it to you how maybe it came from over here back to over here on the backside. So there's all sorts of ways that might hit, but in this particular data, it was from this point back to that point. Hope everybody gets that concept, because that best rolling lap can be very, very handy. What are your thoughts about the split report, Jesse? Have you used it very much?
Sometimes I do in practice, just because the track doesn't change a lot. Like if we were at ERX testing or something, you go back out a couple different times, you can show them where you can improve, where you messed up. without the groomer going out and changing the course or something happening during the snowcross race, it's kind of tough. But sometimes the inside outside line, like the hairpin, you know, it shows that the inside was definitely faster, and usually they won't change that all night. You know, like the jumps where they're placed in it, it might get a little rougher, but you know, definitely the inside that night was faster.
Yeah, and this here is over the course of what, 4 or 5 minutes, and you can see what the rider's capable of. And the other thing that I like to use there before we jump out and look at some live data is we won't go into it super deeply, but these green values down here are some statistical information. It's as easy as the first three are easy. This is just the minimum value for that segment. That's the maximum value, the 493. This is an average for all of the laps that you did. And then the one I use, I look at this one in an off-road trucks and snowcross, the track is changing so much that this is not as much value as, let's say, a sports car at Road America or something. But this is just the standard deviation of the rider. If we stitch all these together, this is basically an indication of consistency of the driver's segments through that segment. Okay, so the smaller the number, the more consistent that rider was in that segment. So the other thing that I do sometimes is I start glancing through these, and if you have a 0.0 something, even a 0.1 something, you're probably fairly consistent. When they start getting bigger, you start seeing that there's that 5.1 as an outlier, right? That really brought that up to a 2.5. If we go down here to our problem zone we know about, you know, a 0.43, there's the, you know, that, and really it was only the last you know, the last two segments, right, the last two laps where the rider really got a little crazy. But on that one, and then on the red one just before it, you can see that the green one following it, which was this little short shoot right here in the middle, that's the biggest lack of consistency. 2.7, 3.0, 2.7, 3.5, 3.8, 3.2. That's maybe that tells you something, that maybe you're not getting through that hairpin as well, and getting the run to that little short shoot. Just another piece of data, right? Use it as you if you find value in it, start to use it. Okay, Jesse, what do you think? Anything else there that you'd like to chat about before we roll out of this and into some live data?
I think let's look at the data.
Okay, so I'm just going to bring it up. This is we're looking at that same exact data set. Jesse may help me adjust a few things here and there, but I'm going to go back to that start. And what I've done here is we have a couple of tools. I've got a toolbar here across the bottom we call the test laps toolbar. And if we have this in you know, some terms you don't need to dig in deeply to right now, or I don't want to but snap mode allows me, it's not snapping to a full lap. So I can grab this little piece here and drag it anywhere I want, irrespective to laps. And what I wanted to do that for is to bring it back here and look at the start. Look at that start that Jesse tells me is so critical in these snowcross races. It's you got to get to that first turn first, right? or at least towards the front. And here that data is. Now I can move that cursor around. Jesse, give us a little talk about what you see here, and maybe I'll zoom in a little bit so we can see that whole warm up period all the way through the start, and then where the rider is lifting off for turn one. What are we looking at here that's of value to you?
Just how long the rider is on the hot start. You can see the blue line going up at a steady pace, you know, up to probably 1100-ish, so Fahrenheit, about 50% throttle. You can see the RPMs are pretty consistent. And then he lets off, engages the clutch, and then you can really see where he's at on takeoff. RPM wise, that little dip right there, so he's probably around 6,000-ish. And then your EGT temperature at takeoff, which really dictates your RPMs off the line. You know, up or down a couple hundred degrees, and you're up or down a couple hundred RPM on your initial launch. But then it's just that straight line across. And if you want to turn on that max RPM, we just kind of do a straight line, and you can visually see then you know, did you start out way below 8,600? Did you start out above? Did it fall down? It just gives you a nice straight line to look off of. And you can change that for your brand or where you want to be for your target RPM. This one was a little low, but I moved it to, we moved it to 8,600 just to give it a good visual.
So that 8,600 is lots of little steps we can do later, but it's just a math channel that we built real quickly, max RPM. And when I click on that, it's just going to draw a line at 8,600. There is no formula, right? It's just a flat line. And so that helps us visually see what that does. I just think it's interesting. A couple of little things. Jesse talked about that EGT, and I just see that steady growth. But what I would also think of as somebody looking at this at first, well, what was that time, right? And down here on the x-axis is the time. We're looking at these grids here are 1 second. So if you look at this, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right at 6 seconds it took to get up here to where they chose to have that EGT ready to go. Jesse talked about EGT being a critical piece here.
Or you could grab your Delta tool.
Exactly. And there's a little tool up here, this red tool, we call it the Delta tool. And if I click on that, it's waiting for me to click twice, once to begin it, and then a second one to measure. So I'm just going to come down here and click, and then I'm going to drag that up to right where that kind of peaks, right? I could probably go to right there, I suppose, right? But the EGT kept climbing. So I'll go there, and it shows me that it was 6.79 seconds. The sled didn't move hardly at all because they were in time mode here, so the sled isn't moving. But the other interesting thing is that EGT grew from what we started at to where we ended. It grew 759 degrees over that time frame. So it's just information that if this is important to you as users, and this is something you want to kind of track and try something different the next time the rider goes up there, try to get them to do it longer, whatever. You got some information to kind of track what the result is. So, okay, and then I'll turn that back off so we can get away from it. And then there's the launch, right? And then here is some data that I mentioned earlier. There's the GPS speed, or the green line is the actual vehicle speed tracked by a GPS sensor, and the red line being the track speed. There's another math channel that we've done to convert it into track speed. And then boom, we've got an idea of right here, about a half a second into this starting sequence, when they've hammered it, the rider's got 31 mile an hour more track slip than the sled is going. Jesse talked about the shape of that and all that, all stuff that we can see fairly easily. Anything you can add to that one, Jesse?
If you want to turn on the longitudinal acceleration,
okay,
GPS.
Okay, boom, and where did it added it down here? Let me just put that one more down just so we can maybe just pop it in there a little easier to see.
Yeah, there you go.
There's your longitudinal G. Longitudinal G, for those if you haven't played with it much, it's the force throwing you back in the seat, or having to hold on to the handlebars, right? Longitudinal, positive is acceleration, negative is decel. Okay, Jesse.
And the Solo and most of the Evos have built-in G sensors. This is running off of the GPS. That's why it's a little dirtier. Yeah. But you usually can see a pretty consistent, you're almost 1 full G right there. You're 0.95. So that's pretty good. A 1 G start is real good.
And then we can always you can just click on these and it gives us what the maximum was. Yep. It was a 1.02 and it actually was over here. There was a whoop there that it hit or something, right? And gave it a bit of a shock. But the general load right off the bat was right there as well. Yep. Okay.
It's right when the track starts to catch up. You can see where it starts rounding off, and then, yep.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
It's really hooking up right there. That's why it got that big pull down later.
Yep. Boom. Right in here. Okay. Yep. We're right close to the end of time. Jesse and I'll keep talking for a couple more minutes. If you have any additional questions, you might want to ask them now, because we're only a couple minutes away from calling it here. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So, okay, Jesse, anything else you see there you'd like to chat with a little bit as we go?
Not on that one, maybe on the next, or
Okay.
when you went to the GPS per lap,
Okay.
you can
So
show
let's.
where that track spin was a lot more than ground spin and where a rider may say it would bog down.
Okay, I've got a couple things. I got what I call what we call user profiles, right? So they're just views, and what I just did is I just went over, and I've got one called compare. I've got one called start, where all the settings and all the way I want it to look is set up for me ahead of time. I've got the histogram already set up in one here for me if I wanted to do that, or that split report. It just saves from hitting some buttons. When you start to use it a little bit more, user profiles will be a very helpful speed wise. It does, you got to still set them up and everything, but it's once you want to see something, these user profile buttons are very quick ways to get through your data in a very short amount of time without having to turn on and reset and size everything, right? So if I go back to that one, and let's jump up to instead of having the start, let's grab an actual lap, right? And if I turn that to, here is a full lap of that first lap out on the track. And now I've added the GPS map. By the way, it's just colorized on GPS speed. So red being the fastest spot on the track and blue being the slowest, and the color of the rainbow on its way through there, right? So it's just kind of another visual way. Some people, the visual part of learning is very big for people. Let's talk about this down this front straightaway, Jesse, and look at that sled speed, or maybe a different lap, maybe somewhere in here.
Yeah, right there in the middle, like right at the beginning of the backstretch.
Okay.
Right there, you can see those three big red spikes.
Yeah. Pop, pop, pop.
Where the rider would probably say, I landed and it bogged down. Well, you can go there and show him that he was 100% throttle, 70 miles an hour, the track spinning in the air. When he lands, you can see the engine RPM pulls down to like 7,600 or something like that right after that. Yeah, 7,400. So
yeah,
it's not going to be a lot of power down in there. That's just one tool you can use to, go through if the rider's complaining about bogging when it lands. It's more than likely just them holding it wide open in the air.
Funny that Jesse mentions that, but again, I don't know snowmobile racing well, but I noticed that in the data pretty quickly that the rider was trying to lift on the top of each jump, and I come from an off-road and other, and we would just hammer down, right? You just it's hard on the vehicle, but it's there is some speed there. And Jesse explained to me, and I'm thankful of why that was happening. And then that was the perfect example of that was when the rider did not lift, and it actually pulls the thing down because of the way the clutch works. Interesting stuff. And you can see here that did it again on the two more jumps there where he was landing, and basically the same thing is happening, right? So interesting. Okay. I don't see any questions there, Jesse. Is there anything else you'd like to kind of look at? I'd like to kind of maybe start to close this one down. This was just an opening and just an introduction to, and I think we've done a little bit of that.
On that GPS map on the side, you could switch that to throttle position.
Mm-hmm. We go come in here. I highlighted that box and I click this little icon here, and it lets me colorize this by any channel that we have, right? So if I come down here and I find the position underbar TPS, throttle position in this case, and I apply that and jump out of there, we now have red being the 100%, blue being the 2 to 11%. Boy, there you go, right, Jesse?
Yep. And you could also switch that and do that STS brake channel, and then you could see like if they were dragging the brakes, or if you had brake issues, you could colorize it per lap and actually see where they were using the brakes.
Yeah. There you go. And which is sometimes wanted and sometimes not, I suppose, right?
Yep.
There are times to do it, times you want to do that, and there's times when you don't. So again, just data, right? It's about snowcross type racing, and then now you've got some information where you can actually see and zoom in with some granularity in and see what the rider is doing. Interesting stuff. Okay, well, I appreciate it. I don't see any additional questions coming in. I'm going to jump back to the presentation here and jump into this. and then, but first I will add, I'm going to give you some our contact information here on the last slide here in a moment. We've probably created some questions for you that maybe you didn't want to, or you'll think about them after a while, and want to ask us. Jesse, I know, is open to it. I'm open to having an email question or two from you, or a phone call, and answer some questions for you as well. So feel free to give us a holler. This video is being made. We're recording this, and we're going to throw this up on our YouTube page. And this YouTube page, I want to invite you to go take a look at it. It's almost all technical discussions of either individual functions or these 1-hour webinars where we talk about something, a little bit of a longer format. We've done about 160 of these videos since the pandemic started in 2020. We've been doing them at first twice a week, and now just once a week, every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock Pacific, noon Central on Tuesdays. People work and it's a little hard, but we put them up on YouTube just like we're going to do with this one. Within an hour, it'll be up there. Visit us at AIM Data and take a look at some of them. The titles, I try to make them as descriptive as possible. Data from a stock car, or from a motorcycle, or from a cart, or from sports cars. While you think it may not add a lot of value, understanding we're doing the same thing with this data and different things. It's how you interpret the data on that clutch, kind of that full throttle moment there with the snowmobile. It's even if you watch something that's about sports cars, we're using sports cars as the data. There's tons of good value in there for you to learn from, and of course the button pushing and the actual understanding how to make it work for you. Okay, and then we do every once in a while. This is a good example. We have some where they're more of a not super technical. A week ago on Tuesday, we had Kyle Busch join us, and while he's a NASCAR champion, and we did talk a little bit about some of his data work inside of NASCAR, and as he started, it was mainly about him using data as he's teaching his young 6-year-old son about motorsports and some of the stuff he's doing, as you can see in the picture there. So some of them are a little bit more entertaining, but a more story time than technical as well. So there might be something in there that you might enjoy.
And there's a couple on there. I see good ones. GPS lap insert. That's mapping.
Yep.
Per exactly. Lap color.
A lot of almost everything literally everything we just talked about. It has a video, a short 10 or 12 minute video walking you through the delta function. Everything we just talked about has individual short little videos about. So take a look. If you can't find them, let me know. Let me or Jesse know. We'll help you find what you're after. And our YouTube page is just a ton of information up there for you. Again, we're a customer support company that happens to sell racing electronics. So it's what we're about. If you have any questions at all, obviously we want you to chat with Jesse and your local dealers. But if you have any question at all, we are set up to take support calls and emails. So there's the 800 number, and give us a holler and let us help you make sure you get through some of the learning curve a little bit easier, and we go from there. Okay, there's some contact information for you. There's Jesse's email address and cell phone number if you need something during the race weekend or want to call him at the shop and ask a couple of questions. There's my email address. Email is best for me, and we can set up a call or a Zoom one-on-one if you want to, and chat about some of the details, and then you can chat with Jesse about some of the other stuff. So give us a holler if you need anything at all. Just make sure you let me know, and we will go from there, myself or Jesse. Okay. Perfect. Jesse, is there anything you'd like to add as we kind of close this one up?
Not a whole lot. You summed it up pretty good. There's a lot of people I see in the participants list that have the solos, have the Evo 4S's. Everything that was on the screen today was like from this little solo and this one little cord. So yeah, there you pretty go. Much just a plug and play unit, and you can get anything and everything you want to know about.
And if you have a teammate that has an Evo 4S and you have a solo, once you get it into the analysis software, we just have to make sure the names are the same. But other than that, you couldn't tell what's from what. So it's
Exactly.
you can compare data with anybody with any AIM device on their sled. So it's very, very handy that way.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it, and I would like to invite you, anybody that wants to, in the email you got. When you register for this one down, I think if you go a little lower in it, there's a registration for the full 1 hour ones we do every Tuesday morning. If you register for that, maybe you can watch it, maybe not, but you'll get a single email every week just announcing what the topic is, and then you can go look for it in YouTube later. If you were away from the internet and can't watch it live, you'll know what's coming. You can go check it out on our YouTube page. So lots of good information in those.
And if we get enough feedback and questions, consistent questions on things, we can also do a more advanced session on, digging in a little deeper to certain functions, or, GPS, or anything around the analysis software or Race Studio 3.
Yeah, this was just the introduction. So thanks to all of you guys for joining us live. If you're watching it later on YouTube, thank you. If you want to continue to do these, I'm more than open to do these every once in a while on an evening like this. Drop Jesse an email and CC me, and let's put together a topic for another one, 2 or 3 weeks down the road, or whenever we want. We're more than open to it. So thanks everybody for coming. Thank you, Jesse, for helping us put it all together. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And look for us for one of these in the future. Let me know. I appreciate it, everybody. Have a great the rest of your evening, and we'll see you next time. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.